Welcome to Family Secrets Unveiled, the place where we uncover the darkest, most haunting secrets that any family can hide. Sometimes, the truth isn't in what we see, but hidden deep within the cracks of life, in moments when we believe we are alone. Tonight's story isn't about ghosts or spirits, but about something far more terrifying, the darkness within the human soul itself, something that, once awakened, will never rest. Years ago, in a quaint, peaceful New England town, where old wooden houses were embraced by brilliant autumn maples, lived a couple who seemed to be the perfect picture of happiness. Lucas and Eleanor, a young couple, had been married for just a few years. Lucas was a talented architect, with dreamy blue eyes and a warm smile that made everyone feel at ease. Eleanor, a sculptor, possessed a mysterious, fragile beauty like a muse's statue. Her long black hair, deep brown eyes, and porcelain skin made her the center of attention, even though she was always withdrawn. Their life was serene, with mornings spent sipping coffee on the porch and cozy evenings by the fireplace, surrounded by Eleanor's collection of clay sculptures. Everything changed on a stormy, rainy afternoon. Lucas returned home exhausted from work and found Eleanor in her study, but something was wrong. She was there, yet her shadow on the opposite wall wasn't moving. Lucas rubbed his eyes, thinking he was just stressed. But as he stepped inside, Eleanor looked up, her eyes empty. Her shadow was still there, motionless, even as she turned to face him. The cold, lifeless look in her eyes was not the Eleanor he knew. Everything felt blurry, and Lucas's head swam. He only caught a glimpse of a strange, chilling smirk on his wife's face before he collapsed onto the floor, the world fading to black. When Lucas woke up, he was in bed, with Eleanor sitting beside him, her usual look of concern on her face. She rubbed his forehead, her voice gentle, asking if he was okay. Lucas hesitated, recounting what he had seen. Eleanor simply smiled, suggesting he was overworked and hallucinating. He believed her because he loved her. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. It sprouted and grew every day. A few weeks later, Lucas began to notice strange things. Eleanor no longer went to bed at the same time as him. Often, when he was already asleep, she would be awake, sitting silently on the sofa, staring into space. Some nights, he would wake up to find her standing by the window, her hand on the glass, her face filled with a deep sadness, a sorrow he had never seen in her before. Even her sculptures began to change. The pure, ethereal muses now had odd cracks and strange scars, and their eyes became soulless, empty, just like the eyes he had seen in the study. This change wasn't limited to Eleanor's actions and artwork. It also crept into her daily habits. Eleanor, who had always been a great and meticulous cook, now frequently skipped meals. She started to forget small stories Lucas had told her. The name of their longtime cat, the names of their closest friends. Lucas felt like he was living with a stranger, an imperfect replica of the wife he once knew. One day, while fixing a leaky pipe in the shed, Lucas accidentally found an old wooden box. He had never seen it before. When he opened it, he found a torn-up old diary and faded photographs. The first photo was of a young woman with black hair and deep brown eyes, exactly like Eleanor's, but with a radiant smile and a look full of life. The second was of an old, gaunt man with a tormented expression. Beside it was a final photo, a picture of an ancient, dilapidated house. Lucas recognized it as an abandoned house on the edge of town, where locals told spooky stories. He turned each page of the diary. Most of it was torn, but a few passages were intact. One sentence, in particular, made him shudder. Her shadow is gone. She is now a hollow shell, a puppet being controlled. My name is Elizabeth, and this is the story of how I lost myself. Lucas looked at the photos, then out the window, where Eleanor was standing, looking out, her shadow once again not moving with her. A haunting question began to form in his mind. Is Eleanor still Eleanor? And if not, who is the woman living in this house with him? What was the story Elizabeth was telling? What horrifying secret was hidden in this old box? Lucas's doubts were no longer vague hallucinations. They had become fragmented pieces of a horrifying mystery. He started searching for information about Elizabeth, the woman in the diary. He went to the town library, consulted local history books, and even talked to the oldest residents. Most of them avoided his questions, looking at him with pity, as if he were looking for something he shouldn't find. But eventually, he found an old woman named Martha, who had lived in the town her whole life. Martha, with her cloudy eyes and trembling hands, told him about a family that had once lived in the abandoned house on the edge of the woods, the Montgomery family. They were known for strange rumors about a dark art they called soul sculpting. They believed they could separate the soul from the body, and once they did, they could sculpt the soul as they wished. Martha's story sent a shiver down Lucas's spine. She said that Elizabeth Montgomery was the only one in the family who escaped that fate, but she only lived for a short time. Then she vanished. People said she took her own life, but no one ever found her body. Lucas felt a chill down his spine. Soul sculpting. It was exactly what Eleanor was doing. Her clay sculptures weren't just ordinary artworks. They were miniature versions of people, but without souls. They were empty, lifeless, just like Eleanor's eyes that he had seen. Lucas's anxiety grew. He decided to confront Eleanor, but he had to do it wisely. One night, he brought one of her sculptures to her and asked her about its meaning. She looked at him with her empty eyes and said it was just a piece of art, nothing more. But Lucas didn't believe her. He looked deep into her eyes, trying to find the Eleanor he once knew. But he saw nothing, only a boundless void. Their life was now just a play. Lucas pretended that everything was normal, and Eleanor pretended that she was still herself. But every night, when Lucas drifted off to sleep, he would see a figure quietly leaving the bed, going down to the study. He no longer dared to face the truth, because he was afraid that the truth would destroy everything. One night, Lucas didn't sleep. He quietly followed Eleanor down to the study. She stood in front of a half-finished statue, the form of a young woman. Her shadow, once again, did not move. She held a small knife, lightly touching the statue, and Lucas heard a faint whimper, like the sound of a soul being imprisoned. He was stunned, frozen. He saw a terrifying difference in that statue, a life being drained. He realized that Eleanor's sculptures weren't works of art, but vessels where she was imprisoning the souls of the women whose souls she had borrowed. Suddenly, Eleanor turned, her empty eyes looking straight at him. She smiled, a smile devoid of warmth, devoid of love. She said, "You've seen it, haven't you, Lucas? You've seen my secret." Her voice was cold and foreign, not Eleanor's voice. Lucas asked her who she was. She replied, in a sarcastic tone, that she was Eleanor. But only a part of Eleanor. She was a host, someone who had been possessed. She was a shadow, and her shadow no longer moved with her. And then, she told him a horrifying story. The Montgomery family was gone, but their art form remained. Elizabeth Montgomery, the one Martha had talked about, had not vanished. She had come back to life, but in another body. She was Eleanor, and she had been sculpting her own soul to live in the bodies of young women. She had done it many times, over many centuries. And Eleanor, Lucas's wife, was her latest victim. Eleanor's soul had been imprisoned in one of her sculptures. Lucas felt the world spinning. He didn't know who to believe anymore. Was the woman standing in front of him Elizabeth, Eleanor, or something else? Was his love for Eleanor an illusion, a deception? What could he do to save the wife he loved? And then, something horrifying happened. Eleanor's half-finished muse statue, the one in the form of a young woman, suddenly cracked. A weak voice echoed, "Lucas, you." "Lucas." It was Eleanor's voice. But it wasn't a normal voice, it was a whisper from the abyss, a voice of a soul being held captive. Elizabeth turned back, her eyes glowing in a strange way. She wasn't worried. She just smiled, a cruel and defiant smile. She knew Lucas would discover this secret. And she was ready for it. Eleanor's whispered voice from inside the statue was like an alarm bell, waking Lucas from his despair and helplessness. He stared at the woman in front of him, who had Eleanor's face, but the soul of another. Now all doubts and fears had vanished, replaced by a single determination. He had to save Eleanor. Elizabeth smiled, a self-satisfied smirk. She said, "You can't do anything, Lucas. Her soul is too weak. She will soon fade away, and you will forever only have me." Her voice echoed in the room, as cold as a winter wind. Lucas didn't reply. He took a step back, his eyes fixed on every detail of her face. He had once loved this face, once been lost in these eyes. But now it was just a grotesque mask, a sophisticated trap. Elizabeth moved closer, her hand reaching out, touching Lucas's cheek. "Forget her, Lucas," she whispered. "You can have a happy life with me. I have lived for centuries, I know everything. I can make you happier than anyone." Lucas flinched, stepping back. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She, a soul imprisoned in another's body, could say those words to him. But in that moment, a flicker of light went off in Lucas's mind. He remembered Martha's story about soul sculpting. He remembered Eleanor's whisper. He remembered the old wooden box where he found Elizabeth's diary. He knew that to save Eleanor, he couldn't fight with physical strength. He had to fight with his mind, with love and understanding. Lucas looked straight into Elizabeth's eyes and said, "You are not Eleanor. And I am not a weakling." He gathered all his courage and asked her, "Elizabeth, why did you do this? Why didn't you leave Eleanor alone?" Elizabeth laughed loudly, the sound echoing through the room, filled with bitterness and pain. "Why?" she repeated. "Because I lost myself. Because I was imprisoned in my own body. My family did this to me. They turned me into an empty shell, a soulless shadow. I tried every way to escape, to find myself again. And I found an opportunity. I found a way to live again, to be reborn. Eleanor is just a victim. She is a perfect vessel." "No," Lucas yelled. "She is not a vessel. She is Eleanor, my wife. She has a soul, a heart. She loved me." Tears streamed down Lucas's face. He couldn't believe someone could be so cruel, could take over another's life without a shred of remorse. While Lucas was confronting Elizabeth, Eleanor's statue began to crack even more. Pieces of clay fell to the floor, and Eleanor's voice became clearer, stronger. "Lucas, you must find my father's book." Her voice faded, but it was enough for Lucas to hear. Lucas knew Eleanor was trying to help him. She was trying to give him a clue, a way to save her. Immediately, Lucas turned and ran out of the room. Elizabeth screamed, chasing after him. She didn't want him to find that book. The chase unfolded in the dark, through the rooms of the old house. Lucas ran down to the basement, filled with old objects. He searched, overturning everything, while Elizabeth's footsteps grew closer. Finally, he found an old book, hidden in a chest. The book had no title, but Lucas knew it was Elizabeth's father's book, the book about soul sculpting. When he opened the book, Elizabeth was standing behind him. She sneered, her voice full of mockery. "You think you can read it, Lucas? This book is written in an ancient language. You won't understand it." Lucas didn't care. He flipped through the pages. The book talked about how to extract a soul, but it also talked about how to reverse the process. It wasn't a book of evil, but a book of an obsession. Lucas found a formula, a ritual to return the soul to the body. Elizabeth lunged at him. She didn't want him to do it. She didn't want to lose this body. Lucas fought back, using all his might to hold on to the book. The fight took place in silence, with only the sounds of their labored breathing and the thud of their bodies. Finally, Lucas pushed her away, and he began to read. He read the ancient incantations, the old prayers, his voice trembling but determined. Elizabeth shrieked, twisting in agony. She couldn't stand the words. And then a blinding flash of light erupted. Elizabeth's shadow, the shadow she no longer controlled, began to move. It separated from her body, hovering in the air. Lucas saw something horrifying. Her shadow was not a shadow, but a dark entity, a corrupted soul. It shrieked, trying to return, but another light, emanating from Eleanor's statue, stopped it. The two lights, one black, one white, fought fiercely. The battle between the two souls, one dark and one pure, unfolded in terrifying silence. Lucas, still holding the book, watched everything. He saw Elizabeth's shadow, an entity warped by greed and despair, trying to reclaim Eleanor's body. But Eleanor's soul, though imprisoned and weakened, fought back with strength. She fought for Lucas, for the love they had shared. Eleanor's whisper grew stronger, like a bell in the dark night. Lucas. I love you. Lucas felt his heart being torn apart. He couldn't stand by and watch his wife fight alone. He closed his eyes, pouring all his strength into one final prayer. He prayed for their love, for Eleanor's soul, and for an end to this nightmare. When he opened his eyes, Eleanor's white light had completely enveloped Elizabeth's black light. The dark entity shrieked one last time, a scream full of pain and regret, then vanished into thin air, like a wisp of smoke. Eleanor's body, which had been motionless, now collapsed to the floor. Lucas rushed to her, holding her. He didn't know if she was still alive. He only knew he had to do one last thing. He took a piece of clay from the broken statue, placed it on Eleanor's chest, and said, "Come back to me, my love." And then, a miracle happened. A warm light emanated from the piece of clay. It spread throughout Eleanor's body, from her chest to her arms, her legs, and finally to her face. Her eyes slowly opened. They were no longer empty, but filled with life, filled with love. Eleanor looked at Lucas, tears streaming down her face. "Lucas," she whispered, "you saved me." Lucas hugged her, unable to believe he had found her again. He had fought with something he couldn't see, a shadow, and he had won. They went on with their lives, but they were no longer the same people. Lucas was no longer an architect with a warm smile, but a man with deep eyes who had seen the darkest depths. Eleanor was no longer a fragile sculptor, but a strong woman who had triumphed over herself. They left the old house, the place where the nightmare had occurred. They built a new home, on new land, where there was no shadow, where there was only love and light. But the story didn't end there. Lucas and Eleanor, in the years that followed, dedicated their lives to studying soul sculpting. They didn't want others to suffer Eleanor's fate. They wrote a book about lost souls, souls that fought to find themselves again. They didn't want to reveal their real names, but they shared their story on Family Secrets Unveiled. They understood that the greatest fear is not ghosts or spirits, but the darkness within the human soul itself. They learned that when a shadow moves without its owner, that is when we must confront it. So, our story has come to an end. And this is also the time for us to say goodbye. Thank you for listening. If you liked this story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos from Family Secrets Unveiled. See you in other mysterious stories, where we will uncover the secrets that have yet to be revealed.